Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good to see you all again in this new year.
Yes. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll get into that toward the end of the toward the end of the talk. uh, we had a little bumpy start this year, but let's get into the talk. This thing about light, in well, let's call it religious circles, for lack of a better term, we have a lot of images regarding light. If you grew up in a Christian tradition, as I did, you were exposed to all sorts of paintings and images of halos and angels, and they all emanated from light or produced a light. And we've adopted that same terminology in New Thought as light being the good stuff. All right, so why is that? We talk about that. We celebrate the return of the light at the winter solstice, and we call it Christmas. We claim that that's when the teacher Jesus came to bring the message of goodness to us. And the real reason behind it, realistically, is that in the absence of illumination, our minds fill the gaps in our information with the labors of our imagination. Now, I recently spent several days in a home whose heat source is a propane heater with an open pilot light. And one night, and this is out in the country, so it's really dark at night. So in one night passing through the room that was lit only by that pilot light, my mind raced back to the stories that I used to hear about how the miners would work in the deep mines out west of with by just candlelight. Originally, they developed better lights later on, but back in the day, there'd just be a candle pounded into the side of the wall, and I began to understand how with the flickering of the flame and the shadows dancing on the wall that create all kinds of movements throughout the room and along the walls. And I just wondered, is it any wonder that these early humans created stories around the things they thought they saw down in those mines or along shadowy wooded paths and city alleyways where the imagination was stronger than the illumination? Common consciousness teaches us to fear those things that go bump in the night. We are taught to fear those unlike ourselves. We are taught to fear, and that empowers others to protect us. Now, during the recent winter storms you've all been hearing about in the news, thousands of airline flights were canceled, and the CEO of Southwest Airlines explained, he said, we fly point-to-point network rather than a hub and spoke model, which can put our crews in the wrong places without airplanes. When we have a disruption in one area, it ripples through because we don't have crews and their pilots in the right positions. In essence, when the storm hit, the airline wasn't centered. I thought, wow, the hub and spoke model brings all flights together at a central location, keeping them centered. If spoke A of the wheel is shut down by weather, then an airplane trapped there, other crew members and equipment can be, well, yeah, okay. If spoke A on the wheel shut down by weather and an airplane trapped there, other crew members and equipment can be substituted at the hub to serve spoke B of the wheel. If spoke B's only hope is waiting for the flight from spoke A, then spoke B is trapped too. So our essence is better served when we remain centered in spirit, when we always have spirit to fly back to. By remaining spirit, we are empowered to protect ourselves and not be dependent on others. It doesn't matter if the other airplane is trapped. There are alternatives we can always go to. When we forego our spiritual practice, we find ourselves flying from point to point, trusting the weather will always be fine, which it is, until it isn't. When the storm clouds roll in, the roads ice over, and the electricity drops out, we can quickly find ourselves in the wrong place without our airplane. Forgetting the light is still there just above the clouds, we can quickly spiral down the rabbit hole of fear and desperation. Like our uninformed ancestors, we begin to see things that are not there, believing things that are not true. Lacking good information of our own, we listen to lies spread by others who are taking advantage of our situation to empower themselves. Early humans believed the sun orbited the earth. Now, Copernicus suffered greatly when he suggested otherwise in the 15th and the 16th century. It wasn't in the interest of the status quo to have people believing that we were not the center of creation. This fundamental misunderstanding reflects a difference between traditional religions and New Thought thinking. Traditional teachings tell us our human existence is divided into light and dark, good and evil. These teachings condemn us to spend our lives in shadow until the light returns. We know now that the light, as demonstrated by the sun, is stable, always present, always at the center, and always our source of power. We orbit around it. Turning our back to the light is a personal choice, but it is only our perception that puts us in the dark. The planet and our souls are always bathed in light. The passing of the winter solstice here in the northern hemisphere brings the return of lengthening days, and the assurance of a new planting season is not far away. Our reptilian brain, that part of us that has never evolved, rejoices with the realization that we have survived the worst and better days lie ahead. Holmes writes in the Science of Mind textbook, the perfect light of spirit dissipates and dispels every discordant form. For those things which are not implanted by divine spirit have no law to support them. Spirit is a nebulous thing to describe to the uninitiated. It exists without form, takes up no space, yet fills all space. It has no mass, but supports everything real or imagined. It has no date of birth and will continue long after all we know has evolved beyond our knowing. Traditional teachings say we cannot know faith without having faith. Science of Mind informs us we are immersed in spirit whether we recognize it or not. Our truth is spirit's infinite nature. We can no more deny spirit than a fish can deny the water in which it swims. We understand our unity dispels any discord or acceptance of duality. Our light is love, and our light is universal. Rumi spoke these words, "Let love be the light that leads you home," reminding us that spirit is love. Spirit can only create for us. Spirit can only create the image we believe we are seeing. That may not seem like love sometimes, but it is simply acting on our belief. This is where our teaching comes in and reminds us we need to believe that we truly are created in the image of Spirit. We truly are these loving, creative, joyous beings. And forget all that other stuff that people who don't understand would be more comfortable if we did believe. Where we see shadows along the walls and imagine them to be monsters indescribable, we experience indescribable monsters. Now imagine if our minds choose to fill those shadows with nothing but our love. If we remain centered, it is easy to do. When we are centered in spirit, we are always just one flight away from our hub where substitute crews and aircraft are available to us. There is always more love and infinite supply flowing from a fuel truck that never runs dry. If we are chased back to the hub by discordant thinking or challenging experiences, we can take refuge in spirit and substitute erroneous thinking with what we know to be the truth in spirit. We are not forced to jump to our next challenge carrying the baggage from a former flight. We let go, recharge, refuel, and keep moving, building, creating, and loving because we are not trapped in the darkness of the storm. We know the light is just beyond the clouds, waiting for us to return. Our sight-based existence places high value on the presence of light. We need light to fill our eyes with signals our brains interpret and act on. There are examples of highly successful artists and philosophers who have prospered with the absence of sight and the absence of light in their experiences was merely physical and blessed them with unique insights. Their inner spiritual light remained brilliant. They were only blind in our physical presence, not internally. They had full access to the love and joy of spirit. In contrast, we can think of all the people who choose to turn their backs on the light. They bemoan the condition of their existence and expend unlimited energy placing blame on the darkness they find themselves in. We can shine the light in their faces only to have them complain of its brilliance. A true seeker finds the light. Our eyes adjust to absorb more light, and our brains digitally enhance whatever signal received to provide an image to work with. Where there's simply no physical light to be had, we employ our remaining senses to guide us. Thinking back to that proverbial candlelit mine, if the light goes out, it's going to be really dark down there because there is no light source. But we might hear a drop of water on a rock or feel the current of air on our faces. We can reach out and feel the walls of the tunnel or drop to our knees and crawl, but we can find our way around. Eventually, we can develop a sense of sight that requires no physical light, but the light burning from within us keeps us moving. Sight is more, you see, than photons on eyeballs. Light, spiritual light, is not limited by physics. We can spiral into the rabbit hole of fear and despair, or we can spiral up into unexplored possibilities. When we are spiritually centered, we expect our next experience to be the best experience ever. We recognize any appearance of darkness as simply a contrasting texture that adds challenge and diversity to our human experience. We appreciate the contrast as a reminder of how brilliant our light truly is. Brilliant ideas are associated with light, a flash of brilliance. The light came on in the attic. In the cartoons, you see the light bulb over the guy with the great idea, a light at the end of the tunnel. All depict an evolutionary leap in thinking. The light comes on. Spiritual awakening, stepping into the light, rejecting the very idea of darkness, evil, or duality, opens our expectations to accepting only joy and beauty, setting us squarely on the path to expanding consciousness and bending the common consciousness to favor an enlightened world. Our imaginations work hard to fill the gaps in our knowledge. By remaining spiritually centered, our imaginations can fill those gaps with whatever we believe. By keeping our thinking in the light, our imaginations can only fill those gaps with images of love and joy, and that is something to shine about. Now, I mentioned at the introduction that Happy New Year didn't quite fit my experience this year. And the reason for that is, some of you may recall, about a year ago I introduced you to the newest member of our family, a little black and white puppy that has been bringing us so much joy and pleasure through the year. On New Year's Eve, she was at a play date at my daughter's, her other family. And at the stroke of midnight, she became so panicked by the fireworks that she bolted through the door, and we haven't seen her since. And this week has been one of extreme emotional challenge, where we are, number one, spiritually doing everything we can do to recover her. We are trying with all of our essence to keep our thinking in the light, but you can imagine the darkness is just there and so easy to step into. And occasionally we visit that place knowing that reality is what it is, but we still stay strong by staying in the light of spirit, knowing that however this story evolves, Spirit is working with us and through us to make it a happy new year, one way or the other. So thank you for listening.